What is up, book babes? Welcome to August's Book and Blush. If you're new here, hi, I'm XO Joe, and I do a get ready with me style wrap up. Now, every time I like to try something a little bit new, so we'll see how today's makeup looks and the new tips and tricks I saw online that I just want to try. I never do anything super crazy. I usually keep my makeup simple, but it's just a fun way to get ready and chat with you. Now, I've missed doing fun drinks with y'all, and I found out that Italy has this drink. It's a San Pellegrino Chino. I'm still not really sure what it is. I guess it's supposed to be like a soda and really yummy and really popular. I've never had it. I bought this and I said I'm gonna save it for my books and blush video, so we're gonna try it together today. I don't know if you could hear that. It smells very citrusy. Oh, ooh, I don't think I'm a fan. It's like licorice mixed with carbonated lemon, subdued lemon. It's a 0 out of 10 for me. Definitely not drinking this, but we tried. I'm coming off of kind of a weird reading month because I had a ton of arcs and like partnerships, which I can't wait to talk to you about. And I was also co-leading the romance readathon, so it's the first time I tried historical romance because that was the main theme of this readathon. I was in such a weird reading mood. I was just like all over the place. So today we're gonna start with a very unexpected read, which is Paris the Memoir. So I'm sure we all know who Paris Hilton is. She was this super big star celebrity, and she's actually considered the first ever influencer. So someone who is famous for being famous and actually use their platform to earn money. So she started getting paid to be at parties and have sponsorships, and it's something that we see very often now. Influencers, there's such things as like book influencers, and Paris Hilton is considered the first person to actually monetize this and create her whole platform around it. Growing up, I really wasn't like a big Paris Hilton fan, and before reading this memoir I also wasn't like a huge follower of hers. I didn't hate her. I know there's like a ton of paparazzi and people who were just really talking so poorly about Paris, and that just wasn't me. I wasn't like, oh, I hate her. I love her. I wasn't this cult follower of hers or anything like that. Jeanette McCurdy's I'm Glad My Mom Died was my first celebrity memoir, and I was just really surprised because I was so down to read a book where a celebrity is telling their actual story. I'm not here for the tea or the gossip or anything to do with like celebrities' life in the spotlight. I'm here for that deep story that they're ready to tell. And Jeanette McCurdy's just really opened my eyes. I admired her writing so much and her vulnerability. And then I read Danny Trejo's Trejo, and that also really touched my heart, and it became my top read of 2022. So when I heard Paris actually give an interview on Drew Barrymore, which I'll show you a small clip of, I was really surprised to hear that she was institutionalized at a young age. Her voice had changed from that like high-pitched baby voice that she's famous for. I was really confused by it, and then she was talking about how it's a survival thing, how it was never her actual voice, how she was playing a character this whole time, and it stemmed from trauma she went through at these institutions for youth.
How are you doing with opening the valves of this?
It was hard just to relive and have to remember all these traumatic experiences that I tried so hard to forget and just act like they never happened. But I've had severe nightmares since I was a teenager because of this. I now know that I shouldn't be ashamed. The people who work at these places who are abusing children are the ones who should be ashamed.
That place really did help me, and it did save my life, and I actually wouldn't change a thing. Did anything about it fix something for you?
All it did was give me trust issues, post-traumatic stress disorder. I didn't deserve to go there.
That super shocked me. And then she talked about having a memoir to go with it, and I was like, I need to read this memoir because this sounds important. I later saw that she was doing charity work and opened a foundation for juveniles abused at these institutions. So I was like, I really need to pick up this book. And it's so interesting because the cover is very pink, very Paris, very smoothed over, photoshopped, like looks glamorous, and it might look like it might be a very superficial book and just talk about her famous happy life, but do not be fooled. This book is so harsh, okay? If you really can't read things that, you know, have to do with abuse of children. A lot of like SA things happen in this book, in and out of that institution. She is so vulnerable with all of this, and she spins it in such an amazing way. And she also talks about her ADHD a lot as well. But if these are topics that really hurt you, I mean, I was crying through the whole book, okay? Let's just say that. I was crying so hard throughout the whole thing. I couldn't stop hearing her story and like reading about it, but I was also so overwhelmed by all of the true events that happened, and I was just shocked. It felt like a movie, okay? Almost like, is this real? And I should probably keep doing my makeup while talking about this. Anyway, this book was so impactful to me and super shocking. She is definitely very honest with herself and like who she is, and talks about her clubbing days, what she's done wrong, what she thinks wasn't really bad at all, and it was just her being a teenager. But what surprised me the most was the amount of empathy that she has and she writes in this book. I mean, for a person who has gone through that much, you wouldn't blame her for being so mad at her family, for being upset at the world, for, you know, kind of saying screw everybody and I hate all of you for letting this happen to me, and like the way the paparazzi treated me and all of that. But she's just not like that at all. She's so forgiving and soft and empathetic, and that's the way she chose to do this journey, and that's the way she chooses to live her life and write her memoir. So that just surprised me so much. But again, it's really her vulnerability, because she suppressed this for so freaking long. I'm definitely gonna do an in-depth video, so look out for that. I'm not fully ready to talk about this whole thing, because hearing kids go through stuff is just so impactful to me, because I have such a heart for students and youth, that hearing her go through that and knowing that a lot of students are still going through that in these institutions and she's actively fighting them is so overwhelming for me, that it took me time to really think about this. And like, I definitely want to just deep dive into this book. So just like I did with Jeanette McCurdy's I'm Glad My Mom Died, I'm definitely going to do that with Paris, the memoir, because it was incredible. And just to give you a little insight on these institutions, she talks about the one she was sent to was really was legitimately opened by a predator of children, and he basically made these private institutions and really played off of families' desperation to help their students, whether they were really doing crazy stuff or really not doing much. Like in Paris's instance, these institutions really played off of the parents' desperateness to help their kids and ended up abusing them instead without parents knowing. It's really heavy. So yes, a ton of trigger warnings, okay, and I might miss some, which is like self-harming, death, murder, a lot of SA, just almost everything you can think of is in this book and in her experiences. So definitely go in with caution and know that you're gonna get a real story. As for the book overall, this is a 5-star read to me. It was incredible. Her writing was very impressive, and I also know she had either a ghostwriter or like someone to help her with this storytelling, but if you hear her interviews, you can hear her in the book as well. It's definitely her voice and her story, and she's so well spoken in her interview when she talks about this experience and in her book as well. So I definitely can't wait to deep dive on that one. Definitely recommend it. Just proceed with so much caution, because it's just gonna wreck your heart. Okay, the second book was an ARC, so I did receive this book in advance, and it's called Masters of Death. This is written by Olivia Blake, and she is most famous for The Atlas 6 and Alone with You in the Ether, which I tried before. Now, Alone with You in the Ether was an okay read to me. I really did like one of the characters, but the other main character I just wasn't a big fan of, and so I got sick of her point of view pretty fast, and I ended up giving this like 3 stars. But Masters of Death was such a ride. It was so freaking fun. I loved it so much. It's actually super wonky, okay? So it's gonna sound super weird when I tell you that it has a vampire, it has death itself, it has death's godson, it has a ghost, it has a demon, a couple demons, it has an angel, it has a general angel, and it has like the archangels. So it has a lot of supernatural beings in here, basically. It actually starts off from Death's point of view, and basically he's in trouble. There's this big issue he's in. They're also trying to solve who killed this ghost and his murderer, because Violet, who is a real estate agent and vampire, is trying to sell this house, but she can't because it's haunted, and this guy just won't leave until she figures out why he can't leave and figures out his murderer. And guys, it's a wild ride. If you like sarcasm, if you like funny, if you like all that dry humor, this is gonna be the book for you. Now, I don't know what else to really tell you about this book because it's so freaking weird and you don't really understand the themes until you get to the very end of the book. But I was just so freaking impressed by her writing. Like, I know she's a great writer. I've seen it in Alone with You in the Ether. I never read The Atlas 6 because that type of dark academia isn't really my cup of tea. I was so freaking impressed in Masters of Death because there's some points where it's just straight up banter. It's just straight up dialogue the whole way through. And I know for some people that's a miss because they felt overwhelmed and overstimulated, but that's kind of the point of this book, is that it is very chaotic. But it's amazing when you actually intentionally read, because at first there's so much confusion, there's so much mystery. So there's gonna be like, this person said this person said that, like all this craziness, okay? And you're like, what is happening? You won't know until the very end, okay? So it's definitely an intentional read. You can't just zone out and kind of read parts of it because you will 100% get lost. But this book was so good and definitely so freaking worth it. I kept laughing throughout the whole thing. I was so curious because there's this thing called the game in there, and I really won't give you any more spoilers because there's just a lot that really doesn't make sense until you keep going, and then you'll have these like aha moments that you're like, that's what that freaking person was talking about. Now I stand. For me, this was easily a 4.5/5 star. I leaned more toward 4.5 stars because there is one point where I was just so done with waiting and I just wanted to know what the game was, and I was like, come on, move it forward. That part lagged a little bit, maybe like 10% of it or so was like in the middle, was like, come on, like get to it already. But once it all came together, it was so worth it. Like, I understood now why the author was writing the way she did, and again, it made her writing even more impressive because there's so many characters in here. It's crazy. Now, if you want to go for the audiobook, definitely go for it. Be careful because you might be confused, but the narrator was freaking incredible, okay? It was one narrator, but he was casted for like 6 people or something. Like, it was insane. And the fact that they could switch their voice so much, like I could clearly distinguish, like, that's Violet, okay, that's Thomas, okay, that's, you know, I could distinguish every single character clearly, and that's hard because there's so many in this book and they're from different time periods and they're different creatures. It's insane. It's insane in the brain. This narrator is probably the most impressive one I have encountered so far in my audiobook journey. And I'm moving so slow because I'm just enjoying talking to you about all of this, but we need to move on. Okay, my next unexpected read is Immortal Longings by Chloe Gong. Now, this is a new adult fantasy, so I'm venturing into different genres. I haven't really tried a lot of new adult. So as I mentioned before, I subscribe to the Fairy Loot New Adult, and this was one of their picks, Immortal Longings. So I haven't yet read a Gong book, so this is my very first Gong novel. She does a lot of YA, and this was actually her debut new adult. Now, I went in really unexpected. I later read that she takes a lot of influence from the classics, like Shakespeare classics, and this was no exception. So Immortal Longings is actually inspired by Cleopatra and Antony, specifically the betrayal and the obsession that was in that book. Now, I'm not a really big like Shakespeare fan. I'm not like obsessed with it, but you know, if it's inspired by these themes of betrayal and twist and love and obsession, like, I'm game. That just sounds like an incredible time. And I was just so shocked by this book. Let me just start off by saying the world building is incredible. It takes place in San Air, which to me reminds me a lot of like San Francisco or something like that, and just this overcrowded metropolitan city, which would be more like New York. But I think I read it's inspired by a city like Tokyo or Hong Kong, where it was overcrowded and these buildings just keep getting higher and they're stuffing people inside. Anyway, so San Air is basically overcrowded. People are dying. There's no like healthcare for everybody. You have to pay for everything. Sound familiar, USA? There's heavy crime, despair. It's just really bad. And it's actually run by a monarchy. So there is a king who clearly does not care about his people at freaking all because they're all dying. You have elders that aren't taken care of, kids that are like alone on the streets. You have teens that have no other option but to be criminals. And to me, it's so scary because I feel like we saw this highlighted during the pandemic, and post-pandemic, it's still there. It hasn't gone away because it's been a long-term issue that as a society, at least in the US, we're not really taking care of each other, and we're moving toward more, it's all about me, and less about the community. Food for thought. That's what made this story a little bit extra creepy for me, because I was like, I can see this happening. This is happening right now. The monarch, however, hosts basically a game every year. So this is why it's kind of compared to the Hunger Games, because every year 88 contestants are picked at random. You put your name in, they're picked at random for this game. You basically kill everybody, kill each other until there's a victor. The victor gets the most riches in the world, like that they could ever imagine, which for any San Air citizen is completely life-changing. Of course, a lot of these winners walk out with insane PTSD. But to them, it's worth it because it saves their family, it saves them, so they take the money and go. Now, this king is very freaking hated, okay? Like, he is very hated because he clearly doesn't care about the people, but he thinks he's like this great person because he hosts these games and he considers himself the best benefactor of San Air. Okay, whatever, dude. You're like killing everybody, but sure, some games are really gonna be super helpful for everybody. He thinks it's actually really amazing that he gets to host these games and that people have a chance at this amazing life. In the story, we have these three main characters. We have the adopted son, Augustus, who actually wants the crown. So he wants the crown because he thinks he could run things better. He thinks if he were king, he would actually provide the resources that they have in the palace to everybody, and he would be a completely different king than the one currently on the throne. Then you have missing Princess Kala, who a couple years ago completely murdered her entire palace. So I forget if she was the Princess of San or the Princess of Air. I think the Princess of Air. So these two cities were not combined. They each had their own head, their own monarch. But she ended up murdering her parents, everyone in the palace, everything. No one really knows why except her. She wants the monarch gone. And she almost got away with it by killing her uncle, the current king. He got away. So now she's in hiding, even though the palace announced that Princess Kala was killed because, you know, she nuts. We don't know what happened. Poor thing, killed her family. They're trying to cover it up, basically, not knowing that she wants to overturn the monarch and get rid of them. So now we have her, who's trying to find every way possible to get to the king. And what better way to get to the king than win the game? Win the game, and it's the only time the king ever pops out because this guy is sus. He is suspicious. After almost being killed by his own niece, he's like, I'm never gonna see the light again. I'm heavily guarded. I'm hiding in my castle, never going out except to shake the hand of the victor of the games. So she wants to freaking win these games so she can finally assassinate her uncle, basically, which isn't really hard for her because she was freaking trained like crazy by the palace. That's the only reason she was able to really annihilate everybody there. She finally got picked this year and she's here for the games. The last character in this story is Anton. Anton was exiled by palace. So he actually lived in the palace, and you don't really know why he was exiled or the fact that he was until much later. And that will be an amazing thing to know. So Anton is actually keeping the love of his life still running somehow. She's so ill and she's in this coma and she's at the hospital. But like I said, these things aren't free in San Air. San Air has no mercy for poor people or people in general. He's definitely so deep in debt that there's nothing that's gonna get him out except winning the game and getting those riches. Anton is also an incredibly high-skilled person, like assassin, also trained in the palace before he was exiled. So you have these three people. Some of them conspire together, some of them conspire against each other. It is 100% filled with the betrayal, the obsession, the plots and twists and turns that Chloe Gong promised in this book. It was so freaking good, okay? It was like, oh my gosh, I was gasping at every turn. There's so many twists you don't see coming. I was tearing up by the end. I was gasping throughout the whole thing. I was so shocked. However, there is a thing about this book that I want to warn you about. Her writing, Chloe Gong's writing, is incredible, but it is super technical, like super technically correct, that it's almost emotionally separated from the reader. Like if you were to write a book on what makes a good writer and, you know, made it into a person, Gong would be it. Like she, in the technical sense, is an incredible writer. But I just felt so separated from her emotionally and from her characters. I didn't feel like she was moving my heart or anything like that until toward the end of the book. Sorry, my allergies are acting up. Woo! Toward the end of the book is when I realized that these characters are super cold-hearted, okay? Kala has to be very precise. Anton does as well to win these games. August obviously has to separate himself from like literally a person who adopted him as his own son in order to get rid of him and take his crown. So they are very cold, and the writing is very cold in the beginning. But once I got used to her writing more and then the actual feelings started coming out is when I finally started making connections with these characters and feeling what they were feeling. So emotions finally played a role in this. Now the fantasy element in this book that I haven't mentioned yet is that some people are born with a gene that allows them to body jump. So that means that your chi is what they're using in this book. Your chi moves to someone else's body and you can hold off their chi for some time. The stronger you are, the longer you can hold them off, to the point of even getting rid of them altogether in the body if you stay there long enough. It's actually pretty sad when you think about it, because you're basically silently murdering someone in their own body. Now the book does touch on how this could feel violating, because people will commit crimes in other people's bodies. People will have intimacy in other people's bodies. There is a sense of violation in there, but because it's happened for centuries, for so long, it's pretty normal for people to know that people jump in each other's bodies. It is, however, illegal. It was made illegal by the king, but that doesn't stop people from doing it anyway. And oftentimes it's so hard to figure out if people jumped or not. The only thing that people see that indicates a body jump is a flash of light, and even then you don't know if it's someone leaving or entering a body. And so it's actually quite dangerous to jump into someone, because you could lose your chi completely. Your birth body needs to be protected. You can't stay in someone's body too long, and if they're stronger than you might even be completely consumed in there. What makes Anton, Kala, and August super unique is that they're super strong. So because they are kind of royal born, they have this impenetrable chi. They can jump into any body they want, which is very difficult to do, and no one can really jump into their body. So oftentimes throughout the book, they can feel when someone tries to invade them, and they can't, because they're super strong. And this is what makes Anton and Kala, who were picked for the games, super powerful. They both have their own goals and stuff like that, but they're both pretty equally matched for once, and they end up forming this love. And so now Kala is torn between bring down the monarch and do what I've been trying to do this whole time, or let my true love live and like get through, because they're obviously going to be the last one standing, right? They're like equally matched. So it's a very like interesting concept, an interesting fantasy and world. I definitely felt the betrayal, and there is going to be a sequel that's set to release in 2024. So I'm super excited about that. So I freaking ended up loving it. If you actually look on Goodreads, which maybe don't, there are a lot of people that reviewed this so low, and I really don't understand why. I thought it was so good. I freaking loved it. You can't trust Goodreads all the time. Sometimes you just gotta try the book for yourself. I thought it was amazing, and so I'm especially happy that I got a Fairy Loot special edition of this book, because I loved this book. I was torn between 5 stars or 4 and something, mainly because the writing was an issue for me in the beginning, and it was a little bit like, whoa, there's a lot going on, but I loved it. I loved the story, the betrayal, the twist shocked me, and I've read a lot of books so far. I hope I, continue reading more to expand my critical thinking and, taste and all of that stuff. But this book was insane. Okay, I highly recommend. I keep talking about it. I'm sorry, it's just shocking. I was doing updates on Instagram, like what the hell just happened here? Freaking loved it. So I ended up giving it 4.5 stars, pretty close to freaking 5 stars if it weren't for like the weird technicality. Definitely a top fantasy book for me now. Really interesting concept, and I just love that you could see the world. Like I could see the neon lights, the overcrowding, I could feel the mustiness, the gas, like everything going on in the street, the sewage. I could feel all of it, and and also the way that Anton and Kala were fighting throughout this whole novel was amazing. So highly recommend this book. So next we actually have a historical romance series that I am continuing. I talked about and have a whole vlog around my very first historical romance, which actually has like 19 books and spin-offs because there's so many characters in here. And I continued with the second one, which is the Wallflower series, and it's called Secrets of a Summer Night. It's book one. I started the Wallflower series and I actually super freaking enjoyed it. And the reason it's called Wallflowers is because wallflowers are women who are very like super shy, don't really know how to interact with like men and stuff. And so oftentimes in balls, you'll see them against like the wall, like just standing there doing nothing. And so they're called a wallflower. So these wallflowers are actually a group of women who have yet to find a partner, or MC. Her father passed away, there's no dowry, her family's struggling, and of course this is historical romance, so it's set in this time period where a dowry is necessary, and if you're 24 and unmarried, you're a freaking spinster. This book, I think she's actually 26. Now, the reason I actually really like this book is because of the friendships that are built in this story. It is so cute. These four girls end up forming an alliance and they vow to find each and every one a husband. They start with the oldest, which is Annabelle, at age 26, and then they're going to go down the line until all four of them are married and have finished and completed their goals. So Annabelle actually just wants someone with a good title because that's what matters. And in this book you have Americans that start to infiltrate, you know, the commonwealth or whatever. You also have commoners that are for the first time rising in ranks because it's a new world. Like, you don't have to have a title, that's all you get, and you can't work your way up like you used to back in the day. And so one of these guys that's basically a self-made man is called Simon Hunt. And Simon is the son of a butcher, but he's an entrepreneur. Like, he did so much for himself that he ended up earning a lot of money, and now he is in like very popular circles, even though they don't fully accept him because he doesn't have an actual title. Now, he's such a rake, which is like this womanizer man that just doesn't want a wife. He just wants to fool around. And he actually offered Annabelle to be like a mistress multiple times, which makes him so insufferable because, first of all, like, why would she do that? She doesn't want that. She knows that they're in desperate needs and stuff, but she wants to be like a titled man's wife, not freaking a mistress to some commoner who happens to have money, no matter how wealthy he is, which in this case is very freaking wealthy. Despite her having her eye on the best candidate of the season, there is a lot of tension between Hunt and her, of course. So this is like an enemies to lovers type of story because they can't stand each other and they also really like each other. So that's basically the plot of the story. Like, that's what we run into, but it was honestly just so fun because the girls are so funny. They challenge each other's views. Two of them are American girls that are so wealthy, but they're considered kind of like new money and not super great in the States. So they came over to England to hopefully snag a guy that has a title but doesn't have money, so they can bring in money and they have the title. The other girl, I think her name is like Lily or something like that. She's really shy. She's a definition of wallflower. She stumbles when she talks to men, and so that's where she can't snag a husband. And now you have Annabelle, who, like I said, has no money but needs a husband. Now, interesting fact, this book had a prologue that was removed. In it, Simon ends up stealing a kiss from Annabelle that makes her feel pretty freaking cheap and used. And because a lot of readers had an issue with the lack of consent and they don't like that, you know, it's a happily ever after, you know, Annabelle's gonna end up with this person or whatever, they ended up taking away the prologue. So the book I read was the newest version and it had no prologue. So I had no idea that Simon and her had this very uncomfortable interaction that I don't think was actually very bad in the sense of like the kiss. She initiated it, she continued it, but it does make him look pretty bad. It does make him look like he really is a guy who paid for her exhibit ticket to get into this event, and now she owes him something and he took it and he left because he never talked to her again. So it makes him look bad in that sense, in my opinion. That made me like him less. Overall, I thought it was interesting that that was taken away. So shout out to B, Julia, and Autumn for telling me about the prologue, and to Autumn for sending me photos of the prologue so I could read it. And you know me, I love knowing the full picture of a world, even if it's not like the best thing in the world. I like to know. But this is a really fun historical romance, and I'm actually really excited for the second Wallflower book. So I will continue the series. Thanks again, B, for recommending this series because I'm actually having fun with this historical romance. Now, before we continue into my bottom 3 books, I have some news to share with you. Now, I'm super excited to tell you that we have our very first sponsor slash promo. Woo! This is so exciting. The book is called Linden Falls by Joshua Hershey. Now, this is very high fantasy. It has a ton of world building, names, even some theology in there, Latin footnotes, translation, but it's super adventurous, very fast paced. Right from the beginning, you are thrown into this crazy world. This book follows our girl Mabel, who is called to basically save the world. She doesn't think she's worthy enough. She doesn't think she's really worth this big responsibility gifted to her by supernatural beings, but she tries anyway and goes on this quest of basically self-love, self-worth, and of course saving the world. Now, this sounds like your jam. Definitely pick it up. You can support the author by buying this book as ebook or physical book. You can find it on Amazon. Thanks again to author Joshua Hershey. Now, a very important note to all my viewers, so please stick around to hear this. I have always appreciated a super honest review, so when I started reviewing over on Bookstagram, on Goodreads, and now on BookTube, I have always remained completely honest. Anytime I get reached out via DMs or via email for a partnership or promotion, I actually filter so many of these through. There have been books that I have denied, authors that I have denied, partnerships that I've denied because the genre I don't think fits my platform or what I think I would like or what you would like, and I just don't feel comfortable just accepting them for the sake of doing this partnership. The books I have accepted, as you've realized over on Bookstagram and over here on BookTube, they have a wide range of reviews from super low ratings to super high ratings, and they tend to be in the genre that I most prefer, which is usually fantasy. So I want to assure you that no matter what, I remain honest, and upon partnering up with authors and publishers, I make a very special note that I should be allowed to give my honest review, even if that means the book gets a star, 2, 3, whatever it might be. I will always be honest with you. But thank you for understanding that these partnerships are amazing, and because of them, it makes content possible. It makes it so I can give you a heads up on releases coming up possible, and I definitely have a passion for reviewing, so thanks for understanding. Can't wait to do more partnerships and bring more awesome content to you all. Now back to the video. And now that we're back, let's continue on to these next few books that I just don't really know how to even explain this next one. So I finally tried I Am Legend, which is a novella, and it's also the book that inspired the amazing movie I Am Legend, the one with Will Smith and that iconic dog scene that we all freaking wept for. So it is a thriller, it's a vampire book, and I didn't realize it was written in the 1950s. So please keep this in mind because there's just some mixed thoughts I have on this book, and we'll get to it. I don't even know how to start here. Okay, so I Am Legend is supposed to be this vampire zombie book type of thing that is set in the future. And by set in the future, I mean it's set in the 1970s, because again, this book was written in the 1950s. I heard that this book had like incredible twists and turns that people who read the novella actively hated the movie because it took away the main themes, what it was actually about, completely changed everything around, and honestly, they were pretty right. I was really excited to dive into this book because of all the twists and turns and the amazing mind-blowing ending that everyone was talking about, and I was just really excited to dive into that because I wanted to know what was so different, what was the theme everyone keeps talking about. Now, I think something important to know about this book is that you really have to keep in mind this author is considered kind of like the founder of vampires and this new genre and this new era of thriller and supernatural paranormal books, because before this was written there wasn't really anything like this. Like, you had your classic horror, thriller, sci-fi stories, but no one had ever created like this dystopian type of thriller, super psychological thriller book. I don't even know how to explain it, but he was the first to create something like this. So for us, you know, like reading it just like out of nowhere, now that we have a plethora of this type of subcategory, for us it might be like a simple story or not really that impressive, but people who love sci-fi, who love thriller, who love fantasy, supernatural, dystopian world said that he was like the founder of this, which sure, okay, maybe in the US. I don't really know if anyone else is credited with completely transforming novel writing in this way, but for the 1950s, super mind-blowing. So I went in with that mindset that, you know, it's the first of its kind and it's the reason we have Twilight now. Okay, maybe that is like minimizing him a lot, but it's the reason we have a lot of incredible writers. Even Stephen King tips his hat to this author because he's the first to make this type of horror and he followed in his steps. So I have an in-depth video that goes into a lot of detail of why I am actually confused and have mixed feelings about this book. So look out for that. It's actually very heavy in topic. So watch it if you want to contemplate with me and if you, like me, have no answers to this question that I pose. But anyway, as for the actual book, it's definitely creepier than the movie. There's so much that I enjoyed about this book because the main character questions his existence and his will to survive and live when the world is done. It's dead, it's gone. The vampires are way creepier in this book because they're not like the ones we see in the movie where they kind of look like morphed creatures that come out at night. They are actual people who lust for blood, but they talk, they think, they're clever, which I think is creepier than a nonsensical animal that's just thirsting for my blood. That's what makes this book very creepy, very sad and depressing, is that the character himself isn't anything special. He's just your average Joe who lost his family and now is wondering why he's even trying in this world and why he's still trying to live. So that's the setting of this world. Now there's a lot of really amazing things I could say, and like I said, I have an in-depth video about this, but there are a few things that stop me from fully loving this book. And I don't know if it's because, you know, it was written in the 1950s and the author is from that mindset and that time period. There's also civil rights movements happening while he's writing this book. He does touch a little bit on like racism in this book, and I don't know if he's necessarily like pro or against it or like making fun of these new movements coming out, or if he's like our modern world, which was their modern world at the time, is of old and we have to accept these new worlds, or if he's making fun of BIPOC. Like I can't fully tell you, and that's what the other video is fully about, and that's what stops me from being like, is he saying good or bad here? I'm not entirely sure, and if it's harmful to communities, then should I actually enjoy this book? Basically what the whole video is freaking about. And there's also like really weird thoughts from the MC's point of views on like missing a woman's touch. And like, yeah, sure, who wouldn't miss companionship, but he's talking about like a full-on woman's touch. And it continues repeating throughout this whole thing, and I'm like, is this author trying to make me feel bad for this character for not getting some or something? I don't know why this is repeated and in a very creepy way over and over again. I felt like I wanted to give this book a really high rating for the themes and for the creepiness and for being in its time, but I can't tell how problematic this actually is. And if it is problematic, I'm not sure I would just praise it and ignore all the problematic aspects of this book, which is why I was leaning more towards 3 stars with those like uncomfortable lines that I read throughout all of it. There's the themes of loneliness and survival, new worlds, and just the monotony of life. I wanted to give it like 5 stars. It was creepy. I kept reading it. I wanted to know what was happening. It was like a mystery. Then I wanted to give it 4 stars because the ending wasn't as mind-blowing as I thought, but I also had to think about it in the context of its time. And then it went more like 3, 2, or 1 with the problematic parts in there. So that's what I mean by I was very confused by this book. But definitely in the beginning I was like binge reading all the way through. Those few weird lines definitely stopped me in my tracks and made me question, what is the author trying to say right now, and what is the MC portrayed as because of the author's point of views and opinions. But I am glad I gave this a try because again, I love this genre. I love sci-fi, I love fantasy, I love paranormal and supernatural books, and this is supposed to be like the inception of a whole new wave of novels. So I'm definitely happy that I actually tried this book. And 100% it is definitely way different than the movie. Like the movie is just like has nothing to do with the themes talked about in this book at all. But shout out to Will Smith because he still did a good job in the movie anyway. Now we have a Greek retelling, Elektra. Yo, I don't know what's up with this girl with freaking Elektra. This was like a really weird read. So I've never read the actual story of Elektra, Clemestra, like all of the characters in this book. It's basically these three women and their stories are intertwined, and I really don't remember much about it anymore. You had 3 points of views, with Elektra's point of view not really being super present until the last third of the book because she's a kid when it starts. She's this kid who like admires her dad so much, even though her dad is a freaking monster and greedy and just the epitome of toxic masculinity and abusiveness. Her mother, Clemestra, is this princess who basically forgets herself along the way because of this husband. The story goes that the dad ends up killing his oldest daughter, which is Elektra's sister, and that completely wrecks her mom. Like to the point where she can't ever come back from that, you know? And he did that just to win a war, just so he could have the favors of the gods and have like the proper winds to get his boats to this place that he's gonna fight. And she's of course so freaking distraught, but freaking Elektra is like nuts. She's nuts. What is wrong with you, you psycho child? She has no empathy for her mom at all. Like she wants her dad to win and she wants her dad to come back because she just loves her dad. She's daddy's girl. She didn't even care that the dad killed her sister. She was like, well, if the gods asked for it, what is dad to do? For me, I was just like, you little psycho. So Elektra is basically obsessed with her dad and her dad can do no wrong, but she doesn't really care about her mom, her sister, the rest of her family so much. And this friggin' war goes on for 10 years. So Elektra doesn't see her dad for a very, very long time. And the mom doesn't realize what's happening with her daughter and how her daughter resents the mom and really only cares about her dad and would literally do anything to just see her dad come back. And the mom, meanwhile, is figuring out a way to get rid of the dad for killing her kid, and she only cares about her kid, which is the reasonable thing to do. And I don't mean reasonable in the sense of like kill the dad. I just mean she wants her kids safe and she knows that he doesn't care about his family. He doesn't care about everything that he's done. Now, I thought this story was beautiful. It was told in such a lovely way. And I thought it was going to be like a five-star read for me because I enjoyed Clemnestra's point of view. I enjoyed Cassandra's point of view. I think it's her name. She's this prophet, the seer that can see what's going to happen, but no one believes her, which has a whole other theme in there because of something Apollo tried to do to her. So I always liked Jennifer Saint's take on womanness and what a lot of women go through, but at some point it started to drag out like way too much. Like it was super repetitive, and unfortunately it was like the last 30% of the book, so still a really big chunk. And then I understood why later on when I put my review down. I saw other reviews as well that were pretty low, and it's because it got repetitive to a point where you really didn't need all that repetitiveness at the end. I think if she had just cut that in like half, then it would have been a higher rating for me. So because of all of that, I ended up giving this book 3 stars. It was not an absolute favorite like Ariadne. It was turning into a favorite like Ariadne, if not a little bit more. But it definitely shows you like weird daughter-father obsession in there. That was just so uncomfortable. And when I looked it up, like Freud, I think, played off of the Elektra issue, which is that daughters are competitive with their mothers for their father's attention. Of course, very Freudian of him to say. You definitely see that in this book. It's very uncomfortable, and I don't know what is up with these themes in like Greek stories of incest and like all this weird stuff that happens, but I really did appreciate the themes on like what it means to be a woman and like lose your identity or not be believed when something tragic happened to you, like all of the other stuff in the book. Okay, first let's spray. I got a fan today. Okay, the next book is the first historical romance book I ever read, called Again the Magic. It is the prequel to Secrets of a Summer Night, the one I just talked about with the higher rating. And again, if you want to know more in depth about it, I would recommend seeing the vlog. But as a brief description, it is a prequel in this manner that we actually see later on in the Wallflower series in Westcliff. It has childhood to lover romance. Really, my favorite pair was actually the MC's sister, Olivia, and her boo, more than McKenna and Aileen, who were the main characters of this book. I love the other romance so much. If it was really centered around them, I would probably give this 4 stars, but because it was centered around McKenna and Aileen, and at some point I was like, Aileen, get over it, just give him the second chance because it's not really a big deal, and he's telling you it's not a big deal with the whole plot. I ended up giving this book 3 stars. But I do think it's important to read it because then you'll be excited when you see these characters pop up throughout the rest of the books. And like I said, it's a prequel. It sets up this world for us. So I definitely enjoyed reading the prequel. Just not my favorite couple so far in this story. I even enjoyed Annabelle's story even more than I enjoyed Eileen's story. And I loved Olivia and Gideon in that book so freaking much. And I hope I get to see them more in the other books. Okay, last book. Whew. The last book was also an ARC. It was also provided to me by the publisher, and it's called House of Marrione. Now, if you looked at my August release video, this was a highly anticipated release for me because it's supposed to be secret society, magic, assassins, enemies to lovers, betrayals, kind of a dark academia, but it's more like cotillion, Bridgerton themed, and it's BIPOC. I was super excited for this book, and I just feel so bad because it was one of like the lowest ratings I've given in so freaking long. It was so bad. I did not enjoy it. I feel so bad. I'm so sorry. So first of all, this book was all over the place. There were some things that were said from the very beginning, like, hey, Quell, which is actually pronounced Kel, and you don't know until like you're 80% through the book that her name is not pronounced Quell, it's Kel. This is dangerous. Never go here, is what her mom said. The very first thing she does is she goes there and expects her mom to find her and be okay, even though her mom literally ran away from that specific location to keep her safe. So already from the beginning, I was just like, this character is acting in a way that doesn't make sense to me. And she's also just accepting this new secret society she's in out of nowhere, even though her mom told her, don't do it. We've been running for like 16 years of your life or so. Now, I was actually really surprised by this book because the way it was advertised, which is how I just explained it to you guys, made it sound like it would be this almost like historical romance fantasy type of thing, but it's actually an urban fantasy. So it's set in an urban world. It's just held at this manor that is tucked away. But other than that, the academy, the storyline, it was so muddy and choppy and nonsensical for the characters. It was such a bummer because I was really hoping this would be such a fun, fast-paced story, or at least a luscious one filled with a lot of world building. But it was just so surprising that the MC was shoved into this world she doesn't know, and she just accepts everything and doesn't question anything, and she fits right in right away. It was very jarring as a reader because I'm like, where's the world building? I don't even understand what's happening. The author was throwing out words like Shoshana and stuff like that without fully explaining what it is, and classes and what was happening. The descriptions just didn't help or didn't exist. It didn't make sense. So it was a really difficult read for me. So I thought it would at least be 3 stars, but it kept getting muddier and muddier and more confusing. I don't know why I feel so bad. I always feel bad giving books low ratings, but I try to be super honest about it to let you know that, you know, it's not my cup of tea, but that doesn't mean it might not be your cup of tea. So I don't know what else to say here. I wish the world building was more descriptive and existent to lay down this foundation for us, and I wish the character had rhyme and reason for the things that she was doing. I don't think I'm gonna continue onto the sequel, but I really hope that in the future they like edit or rearrange the timeline a little bit better, because I know this is such a big passion project for the author, and I do look forward to reading other books by her. So unfortunately I did end up giving House of Marrione 2 stars because of all the reasons I explained. Anyway, that is my August wrap up, and if you didn't know, I am hosting a fantasy readathon because I'm such in a fantasy mood, and so many people were as well. As of now, we have a little over 100 members over on our Discord, so please join. It is very mood reader friendly, and if you've enjoyed this wrap up and hanging out and you want more recs and videos like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button, like, comment, do all of that good stuff. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!